All right, so today what we're going to be discussing is applying the distributive property and then pretty much doing the reverse. So the reverse of the distributive is called factoring. So go ahead and set up the left side of your journal and titling it distributive property, and then we can go ahead and get started. Okay, so this is a perfect example of the distributive property, and the reason why is that it has parentheses, as you can tell, a number here on the outside, and then addition separating the two numbers in the parentheses, right? So the word distribute means to pass out. If I were to distribute candy to the class, that means that every single person in the class will get a piece of candy. So in this case, what we are trying to distribute is the 2 here on the outside. What we want to do is give that 3 a piece of the 2, and we also want to give that 6 a piece of the 2. Now, the operation that signifies parentheses is multiplication. So I'm going to go ahead and set it up. So I'm going to have 2, and I'm going to multiply it times the 3 because I'm going to give 3 a piece of 2. And then I'm going to have 2, and I'm going to multiply it times the 6, right? Now, the sign that I have separating the two is addition. So I'm going to go ahead and bring down the addition. And then I can go ahead and simplify. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 6 is 12. 12 plus 6 is 18, right? So that is my final answer. Now, I could do it also a different way, right? I can write my 2, and I could think about it. What is 3 plus 6? 3 plus 6 is 9, right? So 2 times 9 is what? 18. So no matter which way I do it, if I do it the distributive property way, I get 18. And if I do it the old-fashioned way of doing order of operations, meaning I do parentheses first, I would also get 18. So both ways check out. Distributive works and using PEMDAS also works. But I want us today to practice using the distributive property. All right, so let's go ahead and look at this example here. So what number do I have outside my parentheses that is going to be distributed? 6, right? So my 2 is going to get a piece of the 6, and the 4x is also going to get a piece of the 6. So let's go ahead and distribute. So 6 times 2 is 12, right? And then the next part of it is 6 times 4x, okay? Now, this one's a little bit tricky, all right? A good way to think about this is, you know what 6 times 4 is, right? 6 times 4 is 24. And then we don't know what the x is, so I'm going to just bring it down, okay? I'm just going to multiply the two numbers and bring down that x. But another way to think about it is, I want to see if it's 6 times 4x, what that means is I want to see this 4x, right? I want to see 4x 6 times. So I have 4x, 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 and 4x. How many 4x's do I have here, right? So I have 4, then 8, then 12, 16, 20, 24. So I have 24 x's. So that's where I get my 24x. All I do is multiply the numbers and then just add the variable to it. All right, last one, and this one is a bit tricky, okay? So now the difference is that we have a number on the outside, and it actually has a negative. So now we have to go back to what we learned last topic about multiplying negative and positive integers so that we can understand this particular rule. So I'm going to go ahead and start distributing. So I'm going to put the negative 2 to the 4a and the negative 2 to the 1. So when I multiply it, I'm going to be left with negative 2 times 4a plus, right, because I'm going to bring that plus sign, negative 2 times 1, all right? Now let's go ahead and simplify. Now, what did I say about having a variable and then two numbers, right? So we're going to multiply the numbers. So negative 2 times 4 is what? Well, a negative times a positive, right, when there's two different signs, is going to be negative, right? Think about it. Remember Fetty Wap, right? When he has two different eyes, he's sad. So a negative times a positive is negative, and 2 times 4 is 8. And I'm going to bring down that a, right? So it's going to be negative 8a. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at it here. So a negative, we have a negative 2 times a positive 1 is going to what? is going to stay negative. So instead of putting this plus sign, I'm going to just keep a negative sign. 2 times 1 is 2, right? So we're left with negative 8a minus 2. So we could, if both of our numbers in here are positive and we have a negative number on the outside, everything on the inside is going to change to negative. As you can see here, we have a negative 8a and a negative 2. So everything on the inside ended up turning negative. All right, so now we're going to explore the opposite of distributing, which is factoring expressions. So let's go ahead and set up our left side of our journal again. We have a couple more practice problems. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to set up this problem so that it looks like the distributive property. So what that means is I'm going to have a number on the outside, and then I'm going to have some number, let's say number A plus B, right? That's what it looks like. We had some number on the outside and then A plus B within parentheses. So we need to have that type of format. The way to do that is we need to find factors of these numbers. Do you remember factoring, right? If I gave you 4 and I asked you to factor it, I want you to break it down. What numbers can I multiply to get 4? Well, I could do 2 and 2, right? So those are factors of 4. Now, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to think about the factors of 6x and the factors of 9x, right? So let's do it. So we have, to break down 6, we can break it down to 3 and 2, right? And then to break down x, like there's really nothing we can do, so I'm going to just put an x, okay? There's nothing that we can really take out of x because we don't even know what it is, so I'm going to just write an x. Now let's go ahead and break down 9. Right, so I can break down 9 to 3 and 3. Let me go ahead and put that divider there so we don't confuse. And then again, I have an x. I don't know what to break it down, so I'm going to just put x, right? So now we have to think, what can I pull out of 6x and 9x that they have in common, right? So the first step is find factors, okay? So that is the first thing that we need to do, and we already did that here. The second step is to pull out the common factors, all right? So I noticed that both of them have a 3 in common, and I noticed that both of them have an x in common, right? So that's what I'm going to pull out. So I have here my setup for distributive property. So I have 3 numbers, right? What I'm going to pull out is a 3, and I'm also going to pull out an x, because that means, because what I'm saying is that they both have a 3 and an x in common. So I'm going to go ahead and like kind of erase these, right? Because these are the ones that they have in common. So now the question is, when I took out the 3 and I took out the x, what am I left with on the 6x side, right? When I look here, what am I left with? I'm left with a 2. So that's what's going to go right in here. What about this 9x? What am I left with? I'm left with a 3. So I'm going to put a 3 here, okay? Now, I only pulled out 1 3. So this second one is going to be left here, okay? I can't just pull out all the 3s and erase them. I only pull out 1, okay? So I'm going to, when I rewrite this using distributive property, it's going to be 3x 2 plus 3, okay? I pulled out the factors that they had in common. Let's go ahead and try another problem. All right, so now we have 8x minus 24, and our first step is to find factors. Now, the thing about 8x and 24 is that there's multiple ways for me to get 8x, and there's multiple ways for me to get 24. So I'm going to write the list. So I can do 1 and 8, right? I can do 2 and 4, and that's pretty much it, right? Those are 2 separate factors. And then I can also do and I have to bring down the x, right? Because there's nothing I can think of with x. Another way for 24 is I can do 1 and 24. I can do 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. That's about it for now, right? So I'm going to look at the one that they have the greatest in common, right? The greatest factor that they have in common. And for me, the greatest factor, well, they both have 4, but that's not the greatest one. The greatest one is 8, right? This right here, 1, 8 and x, and then I'm going to do 3 and 8, right? That's the one that they have in common. So the rest, I'm going to cross out. I'm not going to even look at the rest. I'm just going to look at 1, 8, and x, and 3 and 4, 3 and 8. So how did I get these? Well, again, I broke down 24. What two numbers can I multiply to get 24? 3 and 8. What numbers can I multiply to get 8x? 1, 8, and x. So now I'm going to actually set up my distributive property and figure it out. Now, one thing that's different about this problem is that there's a negative sign in the middle. So what that means is, in this case, my sign in the middle is also going to be negative. Now, what can I pull out of both that they have in common? Well, they both have an 8 in common. So I'm going to take that 8 and put it on the outside, right? It wants to leave the party. It wants to leave the groups. So the 8 is going to come on the outside. With that said, by taking the 8 on the outside, what am I left with? So for this first side, on the left-hand side of the subtraction, I'm left with a 1 and I'm left with an x. So I'm going to put here 1x. On the right-hand side, I am left with a 3. So I'm going to write on this right-hand side a 3. So rewriting it using distributive property, I'm left with 8 parentheses 1x minus 3. Okay? All right, last problem. So I'm going to go ahead and do my steps, right? First part, find factors. And if you want to pause the video and try this problem on your own to see if you can get it on your own, pause the video right now and try it on your own, okay? First thing is I'm going to find factors. So factors of 20, I could do 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5, and that's it. And let's not forget the m and the n. M, N, M, N. Okay, 15, I could do 1 and 15, and N. I could do 3 and 5, and N. That's about it, right? Now let's look at the ones that they have in common. Well, they don't have, this one doesn't have 20. I don't see 2 and 10. So it looks like the only option I have is this one here, okay? Because the 5, they have the 5 in common. They also have one letter in common, and what letter is that? N. They both have N in common. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my parentheses. In this case, I have an addition sign in the middle, so I'm going to put addition in the middle and go ahead and set up. So what do they have in common? Well, they both have a 5 in common, so I'm going to put a 5. And they both have an N in common. So I'm going to put an N on the outside. And I'm going to kind of cross these out so I know that they're out. With that said, let's look at the left-hand side of the addition side. What am I left with on this side? Well, I'm left with a 4 and I'm left with an M. So that's going to go on the left-hand side of my addition. On the right-hand side, right, on this side, I am left with a 3. So I'm going to go ahead and bring down a 3. So when I rewrite it, I'm going to be left with 5n parentheses 4m plus 3. Okay, so that is factoring. It's finding what numbers they have in common and pulling those common numbers out. Okay, so you have 2 classwork pages that are due today in class. So this is the time to ask any questions that you need help on these problems, because this particular topic can get difficult and you need to make sure that you're asking questions and advocating for yourself. So go ahead and rip out these pages from your Carnegie book and complete them in class. They will be due today, as you will be getting a grade for this assignment today. So go ahead and rip out these pages and complete the assignments. If you forget, you can always refer back to your I module to remind yourself what pages are due. And if you finish early, you may go ahead and move forward in your I module.